Hello, and welcome back to Overbooked. I'm Amanda, and today we're going to be talking about my top 5 nonfiction books of 2019. So this is a little early doing this book prompt idea, and I kind of thought about that with the worst book video prompt that came out, but I don't know, I don't think I'm not reading any other nonfiction books this month or this year, so why not? Let's do it up. I got this prompt idea from Hail's in Bookland, and I will put her link below. I also came with the whole Bookmas idea from her as well. But I think it's Bookmas Day 7, folks. Let's do it. I'm gonna go from number 5 to number 1, because it's like ranked in order. Number 1 being the best book. So the number 5 is Prairie Fires, The American Dreams of Laura Ingalls Wilder by Caroline Fraser. I have like a almost half-hour video book review on this, so I will also link that below. But I really enjoyed this book. It was, fair warning, it was super dry, very slow, just like something that you don't think that you would enjoy, but I really, really loved it. I loved reading it. It was really informative. I learned a lot about Laura Ingalls Wilder and her relationship with her daughter Rose, and how, the Little House on the Prairie's books only told you so much, and Caroline Fraser really opened a door and window for me to see what maybe their true life really was like. So number 4 is Educated by Tara Westover. So this is probably late to the game because I think this came out in 2018. I really, really liked this book. I thought it was crazy and just like mind-blowing what the stuff that Tara went through as a child. I just was blown away. I also have a book review on this. So this is one of the first book reviews I've did. So I'll also link that below. But so this book just really dives into Tara's life growing up in this household. I think she was Mormon. I can't remember. But this very religious household that she was homeschooled, and her parents thought that the end of the world was coming. So they're stocking up for that, when the end of days comes, and they're going to be the only ones with canned peaches and heat or whatever because they're so prepared. And her parents just putting her in really dangerous situations, and her being homeschooled but not really educated at all, and she has to educate herself, and then she ends up breaking out of her family and her religion and going to educating herself enough to attend high school and college, and it was crazy. Very, very crazy. I think it was a very just mind-blowing story, and I really, really enjoyed it. Number 3 was The Library Book by Susan Orlean, and I also have a book review on this. This is the very, very first video I did for BookTube, and it is super cringy to watch, which, whatever, all my videos are cringy to watch, but this one is the most cringy. So, I'll link it below. Watch little baby me try to review The Library Book, but I thought it was really awesome. I really enjoyed this book. It was very great. This book was a Reese Witherspoon pick. I think this was either her February, maybe it was her January pick. It was really early in the year. So The Library Book is about the LA Public Library and the fire that takes place there, and the whole recovery period on how they get back on track essentially after this huge fire comes and destroys the building and all the books. And then you also have another element of describing the history of the LA Public Library, which is also fascinating. And then you also have a third element where you're learning about the crime investigation into who started this fire at the LA Public Library. So there's kind of 3 things going on, but Susan Orlean really meshes them together well, and they really fit. And at the end of the book, it kind of really makes sense and ties everything together. And so I really enjoyed it. And if you haven't checked that out yet, I definitely recommend it. So number 2 is a book that I read before I started my BookTube channel. I think I finished it in January, and it was a chunker. The Hemings of Monticello, An American Family by Annette Gordon-Reed. This book really looks at the family of Hemings, Sally Hemings' family, and it doesn't focus solely on Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson's relationship. It kind of focuses more on the entire family and how each of them had a relationship with Thomas Jefferson and how that family came to be intertwined with Jefferson's family. It was really, really, really awesome to read. It was very informative. And unlike, Prairie Fires, it wasn't dry. It wasn't slow. It was very like, okay, wow, this is a lot of information that's extremely interesting and presented to me in a very interesting way. Like Annette Gordon-Reed definitely kept me captivated the entire time. And it was just such an amazing way to learn about this very influential family in American history. I think it's also a really great book to read to remind yourself that the Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson relationship gets very romanticized a lot. I think a lot of people kind of make excuses for their relationship and say, well, they like loved each other and he, really loved her and took care of her, yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, she was still a slave. Her kids were still slaves, and she couldn't go anywhere. It's not this really romanticized story, I think, as some people may make it out to seem. It really is still a story of a family that's born into these circumstances that they can't really do anything else. I thought it was really interesting, though, to learn that Sally Hemings did have a choice. Her and Thomas Jefferson relationship starts when Thomas Jefferson is sent to France, and he takes Sally and Robert, one of her brothers, with him to France. And before he leaves, he offers her the choice to, and I think he offers Robert the choice too. It's been a really long time since I've read this book. Offers the choice to stay in France or come back to America with him. She chooses to come back, and I was just watching a YouTube video with Annette Gordon-Reed, and she's like, I wish that she would have stayed. Like a lot of, Black Americans did that in that time. Circumstances would give them the opportunity, and they would be in France, and the right things happened, and they were given the opportunity to stay there, and they would, and they'd make a life there. But Sally decided to come back, and I think it was a really hard choice, obviously, and she was also very young. She was, I think, like 14, 15, and her whole family and everything she knew was back in America, and I can't imagine trying to make that huge of a decision as a 15-year-old, try to put that all together. So I think that she ultimately did have a choice, but I think a lot of other factors played into that choice as well. Regardless, I don't have a book review on this book, but it was so good, you guys, so good. I can't recommend it enough. If you really love history and really big books and nonfiction, I really, really, really highly suggest this book. It was great, and it was written so well and so thoroughly researched and well documented, and if you have the opportunity or the chance to read it, please do. And if you do, let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because I don't think I've ever found anybody that's read this book yet. Check it out. Okay, so drum roll please. My number one nonfiction book, and it was a close one with number two, was the Radium Girls, the dark story of America's Shining Women by Kate Moore. I do have a book review on this book, so I'll also link that below. But this book was really, really impactful and sad and heart-wrenching and eye-opening and really informative. I think it's really awesome. I think the really great part about reading nonfiction books is being able to learn about things in history that you didn't learn in history class, and really taking the time to deep dive into events in history that, you may have talked in history class, but they were very glazed over. It was a paragraph in your history book, and that's it. And I think reading nonfiction books really gets you to learn about the whole context of the situation. And I feel like Radium Girls really does this very well, and it tells me about a history that I had no idea happened or occurred, and gives me this really complete picture of everything. Radium Girls is about the story of the women in the early 1900s that worked at these radium factories that did, they painted face watches, the dials on them. They used to be painted in radium so they could glow in the dark, essentially. And they would take little paintbrushes, and they would dip them in the radium, paint, and then they'd put them to their mouths to wet the brush, like you kind of do when you're painting. Well, you don't really do that when you're painting. Don't do that. Like when you're dipping it in water to, get the paint off and to make the point edgy, But they didn't like how the water worked, so they would use their lips to get the point finer so they could get those really fine numbers. And over time, obviously, these women experience radium poisoning because they're putting radium in their bodies. And they experience very painful reactions and side effects, and a lot of the women end up passing away. And it's eventually such just like, you know, a lot of these women are suffering the same symptoms. A group of women decide that they want to take on this radium company, sue them essentially for their negligence and for not warning them about the stuff that they were working with. Really, they really want justice, and they need money to pay for their medical bills because their medical bills are crazy expensive to treat these symptoms because the doctors have no idea what they're doing. And so they just try these treatments and charge them for it, and they don't work, so they have to keep doing these experiments essentially. And it is just really heart-wrenching, and eventually they do win some major cases, and it leads to modern day labor laws for Americans and in the workplace. So it was a very influential part of history because it impacts us today. And I really, really enjoyed this book. The writing was great. I felt like I was reading a fiction book, and I learned about so many women and their lives and how they were impacted. So it was very, very good. Highly recommend. All right, so those were my top 5 nonfiction books of 2019. I will have links below to all the books I've reviewed. I think I've reviewed 4 out of the 5, so check those out if you want. Let me know what your favorite nonfiction books you read this year. I would definitely love to check them out. I'm a huge nonfiction fan, so let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys tomorrow.